Hey, Sens fans, welcome to Season 5, Episode 2 of the Senstennial Podcast. And today we're looking at Ottawa's roster from top to bottom. A lot of people have been out there throwing out line combos. We're just looking at Ottawa's roster as a whole, their strengths, their weaknesses, and what we think is realistic for the final roster, maybe going forward, or just seeing at least who we think is most likely to not make the roster and maybe why that is. And it also is dependent on a few factors, like maybe a certain player getting signed. But we'll talk about all that and more. And we'll kick it off with Bennett. Now, Bennett, I'll let you kind of give the latest on the Pinto situation since it seems to be updated every day or two now.
Yeah, well, obviously Shane Pinto is hugely important to the Senators lineup this year. Last year he ended up playing in a 2C role most of the season. Obviously, we'd all prefer for him to be slotting in at 3C and giving us that nice depth. But as of this moment, he does remain unsigned. We know that this is a priority for the organization. Dorion has said it multiple times that they're trying to get a Pinto deal done as soon as they can. Problem is we're up against the cap at the moment, and we wouldn't be able to sign him to any contract right now. So there's going to have to be a little bit of movement before that happens. Michael Andlauer, all of 5 days in the job as the new Sens owner, but he was on TSN 1200 earlier, and he was alluding to the fact that they want to get Pinto done before the season starts. He sees him on this roster game one, so we've heard rumors of a possible trade with Philadelphia, sending Matthew Joseph and perhaps a sweetener in the form of one Tyler Boucher to clear up that cap space to get Pinto signed. That is, pure speculation at this point. There's some rumors to speak to it, but ultimately, who can say where it's all going to go? If that was the move, I would make that deal because I think Pinto is more important to this team than either of those players. But who knows? It sounds like the Sens aren't going to be able to just, send Joseph out for a draft pick. I think that the contract he's on, the idea is that the Sens are going to have to kick in something themselves. We've also heard rumors that like a first round draft pick might be having to be packaged with Joseph to take another team to get another team to take him. I hope that's not the case because that would be a steep price to fix an earlier error, perhaps we can now say, in signing Joseph to that contract. It's that you don't want to have to spend assets to fix unforced errors. But at the end of the day, whatever gets Pinto signed and on the roster for the start of the season is probably worth doing.
Definitely. And so on that note, let's talk about some of the strengths that the Sens do have on their roster right now when it comes to their forward core. And I think we all know like the Stützle, Tkachuk, Giroux line. After the first preseason game, they're still lights out. They're still on fire. I don't think there's many questions regarding them. I think we know that is a dominant line, and and there's no reason to really go too much into detail about them. But Matt, looking at some of the forward cores, who are some like surprise guys who you think could really provide some quality depth to the roster?
I think just from a standpoint as it is right now, I like the forward core this season more than I do last season, even with Alex DeBrincat on it last season and Josh Norris. And I don't say that lightly either. With the addition of Vladimir Tarasenko and the addition of Dominic Kubalik, both of those guys have the ability to put up over 20 goals. And 20 goals is essentially, times two, and then suddenly it's 40. And that's more than DeBrincat scored last year. And considering his cap hit and then what Kubalik and Tarasenko are making this year, it's kind of a no-brainer. The second line is going to be really interesting. I believe it's going to have a mixture of Tarasenko and Batherson, and then obviously Norris, barring any injury. He's that second line center, and I think that second line has the ability to be a holy moly. There's a lot of offense on that line. And it could be really fun, but defensively kind of questionable. But obviously the thing about the Sens is they have a very top heavy forward core that has suddenly spread into their top 9 with the addition of Dominic Kubalik, which I believe will also include Shane Pinto once he's finally signed. And in this hypothetical scenario, I do believe the person that's going to make room for that is going to be Mathieu Joseph. Bennett, as you mentioned, I don't necessarily think it was an unforced error to sign him.
No.
I think he's a capable player for what he's signed for. Yeah, could he be a little overpaid? Absolutely. But I think it kind of speaks to the issues of dead cap that we have, and we can talk about that on many podcasts, but this is a season preview and we're getting started. And I think the wild card on the third line for me is one Ridley Gregg. And I really think he can take the bull by the horns if Joseph is traded. And that third line suddenly becomes gritty, fast-paced, and can score a lot of goals.
Yeah, and I mean, beyond that, if Ridley Gregg gets a chance, like tonight, for example, against the Leafs, he's getting a chance to play between Tarasenko and Batherson. To me, that's just kind of like a preview of, well, like last year he got to play with Giroux, and he kind of looked comfortable playing with a veteran who is, as good as Giroux. So maybe playing him with another veteran like Tarasenko, just kind of seeing, okay, can Ridley Gregg, keep up, not just like pace wise, I'm sure it'll be no problem, but Tarasenko is obviously a guy who thinks the game at a higher level than your average player. That's why he's been able to carve out a career for himself. That includes the Stanley Cup. That includes, the amount of goals and assists that he has. He is a quite capable player, even if he's not as good as he once was. He still thinks the game at a good level. So, getting Ridley Gregg out there, and of course, Drake Batherson, who, depending on how the line combos work out, potentially he ends up on the third line for the Sens this year. I think Ridley Gregg, he could really provide something good on that third line. And so I'm looking forward to seeing how he does. But Bennett, on that note, I'll flip it over to you and get your thoughts on the forward core.
Yeah, I'd say I'm mostly on the same page as you guys. I think the first line is quality. We all know that. Stützle, he could easily crack 100 points this year. Giroux has continued to be, an amazing influence, not just, points wise, but just like in the room, on the players around him. I listened to Stützle being interviewed a couple of weeks ago and talking about how Giroux, just is so intense in practices and just has this like intense competitiveness that bleeds through everything. And yet, we'll switch it off in a second and just be like the nicest guy in the world. And, you love to see that. Brady, we've seen him take a big step last season, become the player that we wanted him to be. I think he could probably still take it to another level. And that's great. No notes, keep it as is, thank you very much. I think it's going to come down to our second line. I think that's where the question marks are. You have 3 players in Tarasenko, Norris, and Batherson, assuming it stays like that, who both, I think, have like question marks about all 3, rather have question marks about their game. Tarasenko, is going to be new to the team. He's going to be developing chemistry with his line mates, we hope. But who knows how smooth that process will be. He's here on a 1-year contract. We hope that, he takes that as motivation to light it up and, make a case for either the Senators or another team to bring him on for another few years. So we know he's going to be motivated. That's great. But we've seen him drop off a little bit in the last few years. He's had injury troubles throughout his career. Whether he stays healthy and productive is, not a guarantee. Similarly for Josh Norris, I think that he's had some really difficult problems with injuries in the last couple of seasons. There's no real expectation from my side that will end. The team has said before that the problem has been fixed, and it has evidently not been fixed because he missed basically all of last season. And I think as soon as that happens to a player, it's one thing to, break a wrist and be out for 4 weeks or whatever it is and come back. But when you have recurring injuries in the same part of your body, a lot and you keep aggravating them and you keep going under the knife for it, I think there are legitimate asterisks is to be added there. And so I think that, if Norris can be our 2C, that's fantastic. He's a really good player. He brings a lot to this team on the power play. He has at times shown defensive nous, even if he didn't have a great defensive results a couple of years ago. But we'll see. We hope that he can be that player. Jake Batherson, had hot spells and cold spells last year. 2 seasons ago, he looked like this team's best forward. Last season, he looked a little bit all over the place at times. We know he could be really good. We want to see that consistently. Our third line looks really good. Like if Pinto is signed and we all see him slotting in on that third line, assuming Norris stays healthy, Ridley Gregg, Shane Pinto, Dominic Kubalik, that's a really fast,
that's a really good third line.
That's a really good third line. Like that's dare I say, certainly a playoff team third line, dare I say a contending third line, to have players of that kind of quality there. But the question is, if injuries or inconsistency in the second line cause those players to be moved up, that's where I think our depth gets shaky. And when it comes to our fourth line, I mean, it's going to be a rotating cast of characters. That's always the case. That's kind of normal. Right now, Joseph is there, Kastelik is there. We've seen McEwen play there a little bit, but I would also expect to see players like Josh Bailey or Igor Sokolov potentially get cracks on that fourth line as well. So that'll probably be changing throughout the season, totally normal. But those first 3 lines, if everyone remains healthy and productive, could be really, really good. But I just think that there are legitimate concerns that won't be the case.
I have to give an honorable mention to Yuri Smejkal as well. He analytically was Ottawa's best forward when it came to like even strength, expected goals for, goals against. He played great, and sitting in attendance at that game, he forechecked hard, kept his head on a swivel, making sure he was tracking the puck well and everything to make sure he's in the right spots. Ended up getting a secondary assist on one of Stützle's goals as well. So I'm really interested to see what he can bring. He's definitely a big body guy. I could even see him getting power play time on the second unit, just as a net front presence, kind of like Brady Tkachuk. You just stand in front of the goalie, screen him. He's like 6'3", 6'4". Goalie won't be able to see much, and then hopefully get some pucks on net. And he can definitely be the type of guy who forechecks, crashes the crease, plays behind the net. So I think there's definitely a lot of usefulness for him. But another player that I kind of wanted to focus in on, who's going to be playing in the second preseason game tonight, is Dominic Kubalik. Now, obviously, coming over in that DeBrincat trade, Ottawa wanted to get a roster player back, and he's definitely a serviceable roster player. He was really hot out of the gate last season, was like at a point per game pace for a while. And then kind of as Detroit started to fall off, his numbers did as well, which doesn't surprise me. Detroit wasn't too great last year. So, a guy like him, he definitely has the shot to get 20 plus goals. He's got the speed and all that. For me, it'll just come down to, how does he play on the defensive side of the puck? That wasn't a forte for him last year. Again, that also could be because his team in general wasn't too great defensively. But if he's playing with, say, Shane Pinto and Ridley Gregg, I think that helps offset the potential detriment he has, especially because the center is usually the one who takes on most of the defensive responsibility of their line. So Kubalik's one I'm quite curious to see play tonight. And yeah.
And Matt, to your point, being the Yuri Smejkal truther of all of Sens Nation, I think him, Mark Kastelik, and Igor Sokolov could be an excellent fourth line, especially considering, I also saw lines that were, Parker Kelly, Zach McEwen, and insert any center here. And I just I watched
extremely
a couple.
Cursed.
Yeah, I watched a couple of those guys in the preseason, and yes, I'm well aware that it's preseason, and we're doing our season preview now. But I think guys have already passed, Parker Kelly. I think Zach McEwen is going to be in tough to get a roster spot, considering what Smejkal did and how good Sokolov actually looked. He had one of the best showings I've seen him have in the NHL in the preview or in the preseason game against the Leafs. So, and then the addition of Dominic Kubalik, as you said, like he was hot off the gate. He also was the leading goal scorer at the World Championships. So I think it's a lot to be excited about. Kubalik also could be an option that is traded in order to make room for Shane Pinto's contract. And that's a reality. But at the same time, this is going to happen. But Shane Pinto is the most important out of any bottom 9 player we have, or bottom 6 player we have.
Do you think there's a universe where Greg gets a crack at center this season?
Well, I could see playing it tonight.
Yeah. Tonight in preseason. Yeah. Because I mean, I was just thinking that, like, you know, if we see Norris go down, for instance, you know, would you rather see Greg centering that second line or Pinto?
Yeah, I think probably like Pinto is more experienced playing in the top 6, but ultimately it'll come down to chemistry. Like, and it's hard, right? Because we like, unless Shane Pinto signs, like, well, let's say tonight or tomorrow, we might not get to see him in preseason action. So then how long does it take him to get up to speed if he's signed after preseason or misses preseason because he signed later than expected or what have you, right? So that's the other thing. If Ridley Gregg's already in game shape and we'll see how he plays tonight, I mean, being played with Tarasenko and Batherson is kind of a nice gig, especially when he'll be up against that top line of Bertuzzi, Matthews, and I believe Marner is going to be on the other wing. So it'll be a good test for him. And I guess we'll see what happens there. But yeah, I don't know. To answer your question, I guess we'll see. But I would expect Shane Pinto to move up, but depends on who's more ready for it.
Yeah, and I think
the more I think about it, the more I'm kind of liking maybe giving Greg a shot there. Like, let Pinto, because Pinto, you know, was playing that second line all last season, and I think that, you know, it might benefit him to like start in the third line and get to like find his groove a little bit and give Greg a crack. I mean, I don't think Sens fans are obviously very high on Pinto. He's a really talented player. He can do it all. He can kill penalties. He can score goals. He can play up and down. He can, to an extent, play up and down the lineup. But I don't think it's like a hot take to say that Greg has probably more upside overall. And especially if, you know, he can carve out a role at center as well as being able to play on the wing. I think that I think I agree with what you were saying before, Matt. I think Ridley Greig will be a very interesting player to watch this season. Perhaps the most interesting Sens forward, because I think that if we have our third pick from that first round in 2020 really like establish themselves as an NHLer this year, be it on that second or third line, I mean, man, that will go down as like an all-timer draft.
Especially when at the time, I remember the 2020 draft class, people were like, okay, yeah, Tim Stützle, good value for that spot. And then when Ottawa picked Jake Sanderson at 5th, like I was pretty ecstatic because in my opinion, like watching him in Drysdale that year, to me, Jake Sanderson was the more rounded defenseman and I was actually more high on him. So when the Sens picked Sanderson, I was pretty hyped, but I know a lot of people at the time felt like Ottawa left value on the board. And then when they drafted Ridley Greig, I'll be honest, I didn't know much about Greig's game. I had to watch highlights of him and all that. And I was more on the fence about him because I just hadn't watched as much tape. But yeah, if he can turn into that, you know, kind of, he's always been like a fierce player, even if he's not quite as big as how he plays. I like him as like a play driver, and I guess we'll see. Like I said, tonight he plays with Tarasenko and Batherson. Let's see what he's got. And he could definitely be an option up the middle, depending on what happens with Shane Pinto or what happens with injuries if Josh Norris goes down again. So,
and I think the final thought on the forwards here is if the trade is Joseph and Boucher to get cap relief, you do that all day, without a doubt.
Yeah.
And if you are thinking otherwise, and it should be a first round pick or something, that's on you.
Yeah. And it does save you know, certain Sens podcasters and bloggers and whoever from having to like do, you know, jump through kind of like hoops in their mind to like say how Boucher is actually good. I've seen people doing this for like the last like 2 years. Like, actually, it's good that our first round draft pick is getting to, you know, chill in the OHL playing meaningless games. at this point in his career. We love to see that, actually. So
Yeah,
it'll
I-
save people the
yeah.
efforts of having
Yeah.
to like do some pretty insane rationalizations about a
Yeah.
guy who, no fault of his own, was just a complete whiff from this organization. And
Yeah.
it's best to just cut bait on him.
And plus, the guy who drafted him or took responsibility for drafting him is not even in the organization anymore.
Yeah.
It was Trent Mann was pretty. What do you call it? I don't know. He was very
bullish.
Yeah.
He was bullish on that draft.
No, but afterwards, when he was kind of questioned on it, he was like, "I think we've
Defensive,
like earned
strident,
and
coping, in denial."
Yes, but he was saying something along the lines of like, we've earned it or whatever.
He said something along the lines of like, this was my first draft where I had the keys completely, and I was very excited to take that player, and I'm like, Trent, what is you doing, baby?
And he made the biggest goof in like the last
and Jesper Wallstedt is just like, he's sitting right there. All right, we need to do the ad break.
We were getting off topic. I was going to say one thing other than the fact that Wallstedt did have 40 saves on a 43 shot performance in a win the other night. But anyway, just wanted to also say an honorable mention to Matthew Highmore. I thought he had a pretty good first preseason.
Yeah.
Obviously, I think he'll start in Belleville, but if there's potentially any injuries, I could see him being called up as like a 12th, 13th forward. He impressed me, but we'll have to see how he plays the rest of the preseason. But on that note, after the ad break, we will get to the defensive core and the goaltending and talk about both those things. So stay tuned and we'll be right back. Hey, Sens fans, we're back with another week of football, and DraftKings Sportsbook is keeping us in on the NFL action with great offers every single game day. New customers can bet $5 and get $200 instantly in bonus bets. Throw $5 down on any of this week's epic matchups to walk away an instant winner. And DraftKings isn't stopping there. All customers can take advantage of 2 new offers every game day this September. So, football's more fun when you're in on the action. Download the app now and sign up with code THPN. New customers can bet just $5 to get $200 instantly in bonus bets. Only on DraftKings Sportsbook, an official sports betting partner of the NFL. That's code THPN. The crown is yours. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER or visit www.1800gambler.net. In New York, call 877-8-HOPE-NY or text HOPE-NY. In Connecticut, help is available. For problem gambling, call 888-789-7777 or visit ccpg.org. Please play responsibly. On behalf of Boot Hill Casino Resort, licensed partner Golden Nugget Lake Charles. 21 plus, age varies by jurisdiction. Void in Ontario. See sportsbook.draftkings.com/football terms for eligibility, terms, and responsible gaming resources. Bonus bets expire 7 days after issuance. Eligibility and deposit restrictions apply. Welcome back, everyone. As promised, we're now going to talk about the defensive core, where I think there's less question marks, but definitely still some stuff to discuss. So I'll throw it over to other Matt first. And what is your kind of idea? How are you feeling about the defensive core?
Oh my God, I'm so excited for the defense this year. It is one of the positions of strength. Finally, the Sens have been waiting to have a good D-core for years. Before Carlson, in quite all honesty, our D wasn't good outside of that top pairing. Now we have 3 capable defense pairings in my hypothetical. Chychrun and Chabot are both guys that have been underrated their entire career. Both of them are coming back from injury from last season. Chabot had a down year. Chychrun started lights out when he was finally back from injury. And then, that's how their seasons kind of ended. But I'm very excited to see that pairing. I think, gosh dang, it could be money. And then you have our $8 million man in Jake Sanderson playing with Artem Zub, who yesterday, or for all those wondering, it was the first preseason, and Jake Sanderson put on a god tier performance. And yes, I'm well aware of the roster that the Leafs had, but some of the things that Sanderson was doing were so impressive. And I'm really excited to see that pairing. And then finally, we have Eric Brandstrom and then insert defenseman here.
Whether it's going to be Travis Hamonic. Come on.
I know it's going to be Travis Hamonic. And like, quite honestly, considering the defensive showing that both Clevin and JBD had, I'm not sure it would be the worst thing in the world, quite honestly. I really wasn't impressed by that pairing. Obviously, it's one game. They're going to need a little more time to marinate. But all this talk of trading Eric Brandstrom, it's okay, doesn't make enough space, as well as now we don't have a good bottom pairing.
Yeah, it doesn't make sense when Brandstrom's coming off of his best season as an Ottawa Senator, where he had similar defensive results to that of Artem Zub. So, like, let's keep that in mind. Like, he is not a slouch defensively. This is a player who is going to play well defensively on your bottom pairing. And he does have offensive upside. He showed it a little bit more last season. Like, there's still obviously more you want to see.
Still untapped, but he's going to get there.
Yeah. And I'm just going to throw it over to Bennett, but I was going to make one more comment when you brought up Jake Sanderson. It was asked to Jack Capuano, Ottawa's assistant coach, about, why or has Sanderson been asked to play more aggressive, or, is that just something he's doing on his own? And Jack Capuano basically said something that I like to hear, which is, analytically, a lot of teams now, when they do like a 4-man attack, a defenseman will join in on the rush. And he said something to the effect of, like, you need a certain amount of like goals or points per 60 or what have you from your defensive core to be like a team that is contending for the playoffs. You need to generate points from your blue line. And so they want to activate their defense more this season. And so Jake Sanderson is probably going to be a guy who pinches more or makes more of those rush chance plays, kind of like we saw in the Erik Karlsson era. Now, I'm not making a direct comparison between the two, but Erik Karlsson was kind of given the green light to just kind of go for it. And Jake Sanderson playing with Artem Zub yesterday, like, yes, they were Ottawa's best defensive pairing just like on paper, but on the ice too, like, those guys just click really well together. And they ended up being Ottawa's 2 best defensemen analytically as well. So, like, eye test and analytics back that baby up.
Yeah.
They looked damn good. And so I'm excited to see them going forward too. But
that's
Bennett,
a chef's kiss.
But Bennett, yeah, I'll let you talk about the defensive core in your eyes.
Yeah, I'm 100% with you guys. This Sens defense is the best it's been in at least a decade, possibly ever. I mean, obviously, I was a child for many of the first years that the Senators were around. But this is certainly not since the days when we had, like Chara and Redden and all Phillips. Of those guys. Phillips, yeah, like Phillips in his prime, such as it was. It's been a long time since we've had a defense that looks anything like this. Thomas Chabot, Jacob Chychrun, those are both guys that can quarterback a power play. Both of them, like you said, have been underrated throughout their careers, can make an impact offensively, can kill penalties, can do it all. And then in the second pairing, you've got, the wunderkind himself, Jake Sanderson, with Artem Zub. That's a rock star pairing on your second line. Sanderson he's already looking like he's primed to take another step in his career after putting together a very impressive rookie campaign. Zub is, reliable, doesn't make a ton of mistakes, a good stay-at-home partner for someone like Sanderson. And like you said, if Brandstrom Hamonic is our bottom pairing, I don't hate it. You've got Clevin and JBD waiting in the wings if needed. If Hamonic is, I didn't want to re-sign Hamonic. I was quite clear about that. But in a third pairing role after those 4, I think he can, kind of minimizing the damage that he can do.
You can be serviceable. That's
you can be serviceable. That's right. In limited minutes, limited ice time, and just having him around for the hashtag vibes. If you want to do that, fine. If you've got Chychrun and Sanderson and Chabot and Zub ahead of him, okay. And like we said, we've got Clevin, JBD waiting in the wings. They can spend some time cooking in the AHL, come up to temperature, throw them in there if needed. In a season's gone by for the Senators, our second pairing right now would have been a very good first pairing,
Yeah.
in those years where our defense was like Carlson and a bunch of like empty husks wearing Sens jerseys. That Sanders and Zub would have been like our best pairing. And they're our second best pairing on paper right now. So that's just awesome to see. I don't have a lot of notes to add other than that. For once, finally, we're entering a Senator season in the life cycle of this podcast where we don't have, burning questions about our defensive core. If everyone remains healthy, defense will be an asset to this team.
Yeah. I remember last year we were doing like who's gonna bust and all this stuff. And I remember what I said, and I said like Jake Sanderson is gonna be the guy that like kind of busts, only be the word is just so bad.
Oh god, Can you try that sentence again?
Yeah. He's the guy that's not gonna live up to expectations.
There you go.
And like he exceeded them, and like I would love to be clipped for that. He's not gonna do it, because the expectations we had were so high and he just like burst through them, busted, so to speak. And I think the beauty of this season now is that we were so hyped about the team last year that this season, like for me, it's playoffs or insert word here.
Bust.
Yeah. Playoffs or pitchfork. How about that?
Yeah. Matt, tell us your thoughts on this defense, though.
I kind of already said it on Sanderson Zoo, but Chikrin Shabbat will be very interesting. I know some people were like, well, why would you try out Shabbat on the right side when he's never played there? I think it's because Chikrin naturally is more better. Wow, I'm gonna retire, baby. He's naturally better at playing on the left side defensively. I remember when I was doing when the Chikrin trade went down, I did a lot of look at like his analysis of his advanced analytics and blah blah blah. And I know you can't count that for everything, but because I hadn't watched basically any Arizona games unless they were against Ottawa that season, it was just something to give me some context. And he plays better on his left side, both offensively and defensively. And so to me, it's just like you keep him on that left side. Shabbat didn't have the best defensive season last year. I think we all know that. So him playing on his right side, I think it's like no harm done just to try it. Like, what's the worst that can happen? He gets worse defensively. Like, to me, it just doesn't really matter. Who knows? He might actually even play better there. And he's a guy who on the power play, he walks the blue line. He plays both points. So why not just try him there at even strength and see how it goes? Like, it's not a hardship to change a line if it's not working properly. So to me, that top four is just friggin' awesome. I love that top four. And then when it gets to Brandstrom, I'm obviously a Brandy truther, but on that right side, we'll see whether that is JBD, whether it's Hamonic. I don't think JBD had the worst game of his life. I thought he was definitely very hard on the back check and definitely trying to be more physically dominant, which was interesting because that's not really JBD's game. But if that's something that he's been asked to do and he looked to be doing a decent job of it, then okay, let's see where it goes. So that's kind of my thoughts. And let's
and I think one thing that you actually touched on with JBD is I also noticed he was activating offensively a lot. And he is this kind of two-way guy, and it was nice to see him do it a little more. And he had flashes where I was like, oh damn, right on. And then there were other times where I was like, but that's the beauty of it. We have two very, very, very good pairings. And then the third pairing is good because in my opinion, it is Brandstrom and insert defenseman here.
So on that note, let's switch over now and look at the goaltending position, which I think is a little bit more clear cut, but we're still going to talk about it. And I'll pass it on to our resident goalie expert here, other Matt, to give us a little breakdown of the goaltending and what he likes and doesn't like about it, maybe.
I think I'm really excited about it. And to me, I already know what we have in Forsberg, which is a very solid, consistent guy who's going to give us a 9-10 save percentage. He played a really good game against the Leafs. It wasn't a great squad, but the only 2 goals he was scored on were screenshots and up top. I know Forsey, he's a great goalie. I have no problems with that. I think Korpisalo is going to be the guy that is, he is the starter this year. He is the guy that's going into camp. He is going to be the 1A. And that's the luxury that we have, though, is that we have, in my opinion, a 1A, 1B type deal. One of the guys gets cold. The other guy is in and, rights the ship. Korpisalo looked really good last year on a really bad Columbus team, and then looked even better on a pretty solid defensively LA Kings team. So I'm going to be looking to see how he manages on this Sens team with the defense that we just talked about. If they're able to see all of the shots that are coming in and all that sort of stuff, I firmly believe that this goaltending tandem can put up a collective 9-15 save percentage and get us 45 to 48 wins. Hot take?
I like
Not
that
at all.
I like that 48 number, baby. Sounding pretty good. Bennett, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I'm a little skittish about our goaltending because I know this has been our kind of like our sore point the last number of seasons. On the positive side, I'm going to start with the fact that last season the Senators' overall save percentage on the year was .895. It is not hard to bring that number up. Like, we were pretty close to the playoffs with having objectively bad goaltending. So it's like the bar for having better goaltending than last season is very low. It is likely to improve. I think that's fair to say. Is it going to be enough to like get us to that next step in a very packed division with a bunch of like perennial contenders and stuff and other up and coming teams? That remains to be seen. I think that if you want to have a tandem situation, like a 1A, 1B, having 2 guys that have played together before and seem to get on really well is a good way to do it. We know that Forsey and Korpisalo have experience sharing a crease from their time in the AHL when they played for the Lake Erie Monsters and they won the Calder Cup at the time when both were in the Columbus organization. So that's really cool. We love those good vibes. Let's keep those rolling. But I do have my concerns. Forsberg had okay numbers last year, but not great. And he is coming off of like major, I believe, double knee surgery.
I don't think it was knee surgery. It was just
he didn't have to get surgery.
No, he didn't need because it was MCL. Neither knee needed work done. Just needed to heal.
Yeah,
and I'll stop you there, only because I've seen Forsberg's butterfly. And like, I know, I get it. You're like,
it's
this
nice
is
butterfly.
fucking weird. I've had knee issues, and the first practice is when you're like, let's feel it out a bit. I saw what I needed to see yesterday. I saw what I needed to see in one 10-second clip of Forsberg making a save. I think it's all vibes from here, Ben.
Okay.
Also,
so if we don't,
one other
and
note,
I'm a medical professional, please.
Yes.
One other note on Forsberg too is he said that after that game he felt great, because I think it was Ian Mendez maybe who put it in his latest athletic piece. I can't remember. I was reading somewhere, but anyway, he said he was feeling really great and his knees felt good, if not better than they did before, which is okay. I'll take his word for it. But so he said he feels really good, and I think that'll be good for his confidence. But continue your point anyway.
Yeah. I mean, I still have, my concerns about Forsberg's numbers last year were not good. A 902 save percentage and a 3.26 goals against. He'll have better defense in front of him this year. That's good. But, and then we've got Korpisalo is going to be our 1A by all indications. He is untested in that role. So I think, again, we're hoping that with better defense than the Sens have had in a while playing in front of him and a goaltender they're sharing the crease with that he gets along with really well and they communicate well, it could be good. But I think that all I'm going to say about goaltending, it's a low bar. It's not going to be hard to beat our goaltending from last year. But if the wheels are going to come off anywhere, this will be it.
Fair.
Yeah, and that's a fair point. Like I think that Korpisalo, a lot of people were skeptical of his time in Columbus because he had a couple good seasons, he had some bad seasons. I know when we had Aaron Portzline on a couple months ago now, he said that he thinks Korpisalo will be great for Ottawa, and that like once he dealt with those hip issues and he got hip surgery, that he played much better and he looked more comfortable and he was more technically sound and a more mature goalie. So he had only positive things to say about him. So that gave me a lot of hope. And I guess we'll see, right? Like you never know. Words are words. You got to put them on the ice and see what happens. But I think having that duo reunite, and they were really good together in the AHL, and I don't know, I think it'll be healthier competition, you know, like with Cam Talbot and Anton Forsberg, it's more of like, okay, who's going to be our better goalie? They're competing with one another. Here it's like there's competition, but to me it's like because both guys are familiar with each other, it's less of like a, is this guy going to take my job from me? It's more of like a, we're trying to get the best out of one another, share the crease, and like if someone's on a hot streak, awesome, I'm happy for them. I don't know if that makes sense, but that's kind of the vibe I get from it. Yeah, so we'll see how it goes. I think Forsberg will have a better season this year, and if him and Korpisalo are even playing like league average, I think the Sens are in a good spot. So
yeah, that's the thing. That's a
and Bennett, as a, like, I think you're making completely fair points. I think I'm desperately needing them to be good.
Yeah.
Simply for vibes alone, but I think that all is kind of conducive on head honcho, Mr. Head Coach DJ Smith.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that might be a good segue into DJ Smith.
That's right. Yeah. Do you want to come in second, Nath, and lay down the fire, or do you want to just launch into it?
I mean, I might give the more optimistic approach to things,
do it,
and then you guys can go kind of balls to the wall, do what you want. So my thoughts, I've kind of like, people are gonna hate me for this, and I'll just take the heat. I've softened my stance kind of on DJ Smith. There's a lot of people who want him gone, think he's a garbage coach, this, that, and the other thing. For me, it's obvious that the players love him. And I've looked at the situations. When you look at Tortorella, you look at Babcock, there are coaches who may be good tactically, but have huge issues with controlling their locker rooms and getting the best of their players. I don't want that for the Sens. And I would not want Tortorella or Babcock touching the locker room the way it stands right now. I don't care if they're tactically better than DJ Smith. They have to, for me, if you want to change the coach, they have to fit a coach who will let the players, like, hold the players accountable, but they still need to have good rapport with the players. And they would have to be good tactically. And it's going to be hard to find a coach who could replace DJ Smith and offer all of that. Now, DJ Smith does have his faults, but last year, Ottawa's special teams improved quite a bit. And yes, I agree, their even strength does need to improve. But now, like, and I liked Holden, but when you go from having Holden in potentially your top four or Hamonic in your top four to now having Chychrun, Shabbat, Sanderson, and Zub as your top four, I think immediately that helps. Talbot, like, don't forget, Talbot missed like the first month of last season because he was injured. So you have a guy like Cam Talbot who didn't even play that much, and he was good for a bit, and then he kind of just fell off and was never that great, and then wanted a ton of money and then signed for barely any. So, you know, you have goalies who were either injured, didn't play well. Ottawa had to rotate a bunch of them. Norris was injured. Zub was injured. Matthew Joseph was injured. Mott was injured. I can run down the list. There's a lot. Shabbat, you know, Chychrun. You just had so many injuries that you just couldn't. It was like fighting an uphill battle. And yes, I will put some of the blame on DJ Smith. The team needs to be better at even strength. There's no doubt in my mind. And they have to play the full 60 minutes. I know hockey speak, but they need to do it. So really the even strength thing is where I will be judging him the most. He has the personnel to kill penalties and to get goals on the power play. It's just what happens when you're not on special teams. And in my opinion, injuries and goaltending were the biggest factors in the Sens not making the playoffs last year. If they can even get, like I said, league average goaltending and maybe some help on that injury front, a little less than last year, I think they'll be good to go. So that's my comments. I'm kind of riding that cautious optimism wave, but I'll throw it over to either one of you to discuss maybe at a little bit more of a
Critical.
I don't know. Critical, sure.
Bennett,
Yeah.
take it away.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think I'm probably splitting the difference between the two of you guys now. It's like I've gone back and forth on DJ Smith in the last few seasons. I think to your point, Matt, it is undeniable he's cultivated a really excellent locker room atmosphere, and that is not nothing. That is like not every team has that. Not even every good team has that.
Yeah.
And he has the respect of the players, which is hard earned. But he also has a tendency to make what many Sens fans would think are boneheaded decisions with lineups, and he has a hard on for size and veterancy that a lot of NHL coaches have. You know, you show an NHL coach, a 30+ dude who's 6'4" and, you know, plays with size and grit, and a lot of them, the old school guys in particular. I mean, DJ is a relatively young coach. He's not old school in terms of like age, but I think he is old school a little bit in his approach. And I think that he sees size and veterancy with he sees more value in that than in guys who are smaller, quit faster, and maybe have more upside, but who, you know, we've seen in the cases like Eric Brandstrom or certain young players at times, like he doesn't seem to fully trust. And, you know, that's an issue. I think the more glaring issue is the fact that the team does have a tendency to fall apart early in the year, and that we always end up trying to dig ourselves out of a hole, which usually ends up being impossible. This has happened in pretty much every season that DJ Smith has been in charge. It happened in the pandemic season, happened in like the first season post-COVID, if you can say that. It happened last season. You know, November is our month from hell. That'll be the litmus test. If the Sens, with more depth than we've had in a while, and, you know, players that are entering their primes, both physically and, you know, kind of like mentally, spiritually, emotionally, whatever it is, you know, if we still fall on our ass in November, that's on DJ. And I think he's going to have a short leash. And all I want to say is further is that if we end up in a situation where we do have to let DJ go, I don't want a quick fix. We have time and resources and clout that I think we haven't had in a very long time in this organization. I want everyone in the world of hockey that could do this job to be interviewed for it. You know, I want a really deep search. I want them looking under the couch cushions for people that haven't had a shot. I want them to be thinking of big name guys who are out of a job right now. You know, like who could do that job, a name that we might never have been able to attract in the past. Obviously, I'm not talking about guys like Quenneville Babcock here. I'm talking about guys who aren't, you know, asshats. But yeah, and so I want a really fulsome search, and I want to make sure that we get it right, because this team is in a pretty good spot right now, all things considered. And, you know, if we're going to get rid of DJ, it needs to be an upgrade, you know, because he's not the worst coach. So, you know, it is possible to hire a worse person than DJ Smith. And I hope that, you know, in this new era of Sens ownership, where we are, you know, no longer broke and people no longer see us as a joke, that, you know, we can hire that name. And just one last thing here about DJ Smith. I think that he's gonna have to go eventually. Like, no team has ever, very, very few teams have ever gone, you know, through pre-rebuild, rebuild, playoffs, you know, contending, cup with one coach. Like, it basically never happens. We're going to have to pull the trigger at some point. Is that this year? Is that next year? Who knows? But like, his time is numbered.
I just want to make one note before we pass it over to Matt, but he did address November's in his presser with Pierre Dorion. Now, he did mention that they've been like he literally called it the elephant in the room. So I appreciate him being so blunt about it. And he said that they need to win games in November. And he said if they don't win on November 1st, then they got to win on November 2nd. So I kind of like that he knows like that's an issue for the team and they have to be ready to play and they can't have a crappy month like November again and again and again, or else playoffs are going to be off the table. And so it seems like he's going to hold people accountable. He said if somebody's not on, he's going to put someone in the lineup and give them a chance because they'll be switched on. They'll be wanting to keep a spot in the lineup. So I think he's going to be a little bit more aggressive with his choices in roster decisions and personnel. And I think that that's going to be really important. And it'll be interesting to watch to see if he actually holds himself to what he said. But Matt, I'll give it to you. Take the floor.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of great has been said. I think it can't be understated how important it is to have a unified room. And Claude Giroux was saying like he's never seen people coming to the rink this early. Like I think they put the ice in early at CTC because basically the whole team was here. And that has a lot to do with DJ. And that is really important. And you're absolutely right. We can do worse than DJ. And he said a lot of good stuff. And I want to believe. With that said, like it's playoffs or pitchforks in this scenario. If we do not make the playoffs, he does not survive this season. Quite frankly, like I think if we have a crappy November, he's not surviving November. And with that, alongside that is Pierre Dorion won't survive it either. He gave him the stamp of approval, and that's what the owner and who the owner is bringing in sees as important. So DJ is going to have to come out guns blazing. He's going to have to address how the second period is always crappy for the Senators. He's going to have to address why we are always taking crappy penalties. We already took a too many men penalty, and I'm pretty positive we took the most of the last season out of any team. And all of these things to improve the team. Yes, it's going to come down to injuries and what's going to happen. But at the end of the day, we need to win. And that's the only thing I care about. I think DJ is a great guy. And if he starts winning, he's got me sold. We are in a results-oriented business. If you win games, you have a job. If you don't win games, you don't have a job. And he's lost way too many games to still have a job, but yet here he is. So I'm going into the season with DJ is going to win some games, and he's going to keep winning games, because if he doesn't, his job is gone. And that's all.
On that note, thank you everyone for watching this week's episode or listening on our audio formats. You can see all of our social media platforms listed down there on the overlay. So please go ahead and follow us on there, and please consider subscribing to us if you've enjoyed our content. We're looking forward to getting some more interesting guests, some new guests on the way in the near future. So please look forward to that. And as always, go Sens go, and looking forward to some more preseason action, but more importantly, that regular season coming up in a couple weeks.
Go Sens go, folks.